Hello everyone, I'm Richard, once again with Oscar and Rod, and today we are doing a commentary on the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven.
Hello everyone, I'm so glad to be back on another Ridley Scott classic. Yes, that's right, this film, Kingdom of Heaven, director's cut, this is a masterpiece.
Yes, and it's good to be back to do another audio commentary. I'm Rod, and this is going to be my first viewing of Kingdom of Heaven. I wanted to wait until I had the extended version to watch, because I didn't want to watch the theatrical and then watch it. I heard great things about the director's cut, so it's the way I wanted to go about it.
Awesome.
I love this opening score by Harry Gregson Williams.
Like Hans Zimmer, he really does set up the tone and mood of the place before we even get to, before we even see what happens.
You really get a sense of medieval France, literally right away from the first opening shot.
Precisely.
What do you guys feel about openings to movies outside of Star Wars, of course, that have an opening sort of, not a crawl, but it has text and it gives you the setup for the story?
I think sometimes it works, and sometimes it can be annoying. I think the Kingdom of Heaven it falls into the former category because it requires context. It does require a bit of understanding of what the times were like.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you, Oscar. It depends on the kind of movie, I guess, and I'm glad that this does have an opening text to kind of like clue you into what's going on.
It's a pretty somber opening with the digging of a grave and a deceased woman in this wintry landscape.
It does sort of make you see why people did want to emigrate to a hotter country, because I think this was the time when Europe was in the grip of the long winter.
Was it? I mean, it's. I actually don't really. My knowledge of the climate at the time is limited at best.
It's interesting because there was schizophrenic weather and climate change even back then.
I like openings to movies like this because it draws you in to the world of the film, and if a movie can do that, then it's got me in the first minute or so.
Crusaders.
It's also incredible to think that this is actually shot in Spain, wasn't it? And
Andalusia, yes.
And artificial snow and lighting was applied to make it look like France in winter.
Well, if you've got a good production crew, then they can pretty much get away with anything.
Exactly.
Because that snow looks real.
Yeah.
This is for the burial for my lord. Kind of mess.
Now, the interesting thing is, Michael Sheen's character, the priest, his character got mostly cut out of the theatrical version. But here, this mini subplot involving Bailey and the main character's dead wife and his half brother, the priest, and what he does, that got added back into this version.
Well, as we see later on, it really does provide some much needed depth to their very tenuous relationship, as well as what kind of a man the priest is.
Yeah. Oh, and that castle was actually there, and they said it was about 100 years after the time period this film is set in, but they said it was pretty much bang on the kind of castle they wanted.
Well, in that case, I think they made the artistically interesting choice. Historical accuracy put aside.
That's right. Yeah, this was all shot on location.
too far. It can go too
I love
far
it when
myself.
directors do location shooting,
It is so
because
well done.
it's on an actual location instead of a green screen.
Yeah, the castle isn't a CGI, or as in Monty Python, it's not. It's only a model.
Yeah, John Cleese will pop up out of there in a minute.
Write your brother I cannot finish my church. Let him out. And give him this. And tell him that he is at the very
And yeah, this was also cut out of the theatrical version, where we see the flashback of Bailey remembering his wife when she was pregnant.
And also, yet another wonderful score to accompany it.
Yeah, I really think Fox, they mishandled this film badly when they first put it out. They basically took it away from Ridley Scott and took out all the important character and plot elements.
And they wanted something akin to Gladiator, but in reality, the film was very different from Gladiator, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be like wanting him to change if he was doing a movie set in outer space, but it wasn't an alien movie, and it was a different story. That'd be as stupid as them wanting him to turn it into another alien movie.
The bishop needs you.
If he also kind of like...
Release him.
Sorry.
And I don't understand that, because this wasn't a first time director who probably couldn't be trusted with a big budget or anything like that. This was Ridley Scott. You know, you don't get a more safe pair of hands than him.
No, indeed.
Especially since Alien was with 20th Century Fox.
So was Gladiator, I think.
And a lot of his more recent features, like Prometheus, The Martian, and Exodus: Gods and Kings, all of them Fox Productions. So it's interesting how that even though Ridley Scott has his ups and downs with that studio, he still comes back to them.
It's kind of like James Cameron with 20th Century Fox, because of course, he would go over budget sometimes. And so they weren't too fond of that, but yet, you know, they still very much want to partner with him when he's doing a movie, so I guess the loyalty between director and studio is such that even when there's disagreements, they still manage to want to work together again.
And it's interesting in this film because we get a couple of actors who would go to star in Game of Thrones, like Robert Pugh. He plays the Lord of the Village, and his son, Robert Pugh, I think he went to go play Lord Craster in Game of Thrones.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And we get Nikolai Coster-Waldau. I think I'm
Nikolai
pronouncing.
Coster-Waldau. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he plays the son of the Lord.
And of course, everyone knows him as Jaime Lannister.
That's it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's very humorous in hindsight to look at these actors and they look very in place, both in Game of Thrones and Kingdom of Heaven. They're the kind of actors who fit into the medieval landscape so effortlessly.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think someone like Justin Timberlake would fit into that kind of era.
No.
Nah, not really.
Hell, I wouldn't even fit in that kind of era.
And the reason why I think Orlando Bloom is a good actor is because in this scene he's bending down over the place where his wife was buried, or kneeling down, I should say, and he just says it all with just one look, one look of grief.
Grief and despondency, the realization, the fact that he's lost everything.
Yeah, the things that made this place his place. And I think I buy Michael Sheen and Orlando Bloom as half brothers because they do look a bit similar.
They look a little similar, but they also look definitely influenced by their trades and their backgrounds. Sheen is appropriately Weasley as the priest, and Orlando cuts a fine blacksmithing figure, just like he did in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep, pretty much. And as you said, I think it was when we did the Hobbit movies, you said Orlando Bloom is only ever as good as his scripts, and here he's got a very good script to work with.
Indeed. I feel much the same way here as I did in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit about him.
That is a sin.
This was a film where Orlando Bloom tried to break away from his traditional image, and he tried to something a bit more meaty. And some people were turned off by that, but I don't really understand why, to be honest.
One of my favourite UK critics, Mark Kermode, he slated Orlando's performance in this film, saying that he single-handedly ruined the movie.
No, I don't think that's true. If anyone ruined this film, it was 20th Century Fox.
Preach.
Yeah, I guess he was typecast, or a lot of people wanted to only see him as a certain type of role, and when he did something different, it was like, oh, this doesn't suit him.
And really, I don't think there's anything wrong with actors wanting to try something a bit different. And if anything, I think that's something to respect.
I think he took his shots with Ridley Scott in Kingdom of Heaven. It wasn't as well received as it should have been, and he hasn't really had the career he should have had.
We shall work.
Well, at least he got the Hobbit movies again.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And for a time, he was with Miranda Kerr.
I suppose so.
But yeah, I'd like to see him be in a lot more movies. I mean, maybe the rumoured cameo or appearance he's having in the next Pirates of the Caribbean might whet the appetite a bit for some people to want to see him in more things.
Hopefully, yes.
That is the man. That is the man.
You're an armourer, yes?
What do you guys think of the fact that this film shows Christians and Muslims living in peace with one another?
Your dead wife and stillborn
Well, I think there needs to be a great deal of context to how you frame the cohabitation of Christians and Muslims, and as such, the film makes a very definite case in that there are good Christians and there are bad Christians, just as there are honourable Muslims and Muslims without honour. That it really isn't as black and white as the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages made it out to be.
No, there's definitely a lot of grey area in between with a lot of people, and yeah, it doesn't matter what creed you are or ethnicity or anything like that. Basic human behaviour, and that we've got the yin and the yang, you know, we've got the bad and the good that is within all of us. And it's one of those things where in some people they go more towards the evil side of themselves and some go more towards the good, and then you've got ones who are in between. So it's sort of like each person is different kind of thing, and you can't really tar everyone with the same brush.
Precisely. I really like the scene because we get to, well, first we do get to see Bailey Network, but we also get to understand why he was so good in the Siege of Jerusalem, because he actually had experiences with warfare and siege machines.
Again, that was something that was cut out of the theatrical version, and it just makes you ask. It just makes you ask why. and they go, well, no, it was cut out for runtime, and it's like, well, The Return of the King, that was, 3 hours long, and people sat in the cinema for that. And Orlando Bloom was a big name. Ridley Scott's a big name director, and he had big name actors like Liam Neeson here, so I just can't wrap my head around that logic at all.
Me neither.
I know that this man barely mourns his wife.
What do you guys think of the supporting cast around Orlando Bloom so far? At least in this first part of the movie.
I always think they're tough, interesting guys. You know, they're crusaders. They've been fighting for a long time, and you get the sense that they're a bit mean, but they've got a good side as well, because they wouldn't kill. I don't think they'd kill anyone unless someone tried to kill them.
It also helps that we have really good supporting actors like Liam Neeson and David Thwaites as Godfrey and the Hospitaller as well. Also, very commendable performances.
David Thewlis, I think his name.
Thewlis. David Thewlis, thank you. Sorry.
Who, of course, played Remus Lupin in the Harry Potter movies.
Indeed. And he was also quite good in that.
He was, yeah. I quite liked him in that role. And the funny thing is, he was also in the remake of The Omen. He took the journalist photographer character in that movie.
Courteous, I should say, that it was against her objections. But I was the Lord's brother, and she had no choice. But I did not force her.
I really like how Godfrey is able to explain how how Balian's mother came to fall in love with him, and it's basically explaining a very delicate and difficult subject in a short space of time, and with a lot of sincerity and gravity to it. And given how much Liam Neeson has showed up in a lot of fairly insubstantial action films, when he does get a chance to act, it's always incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I like Liam Neeson, the action star, but it is good when he gets a role that makes him, put in a better performance than what we kind of get most of the time these days. I mean, I'll be honest, I like films like Non-Stop, but they are really just fluff, and at the end of the day, they're nothing compared to this.
Indeed.
I also quite enjoyed him in The Grey. I think that's a really good movie. It's another one that really sets a tone early on and draws you in and keeps you in the world of the film.
And yeah, unfortunately, there's no "I'm going to find you and I'm going to kill you" Liam Neeson moment in this.
There's a version of it, though it's the medieval knight equivalent of it.
Yeah. And to think that forge was real. Like, Orlando Bloom's really working around that forge.
Indeed.
Actually, the cinematography in this movie, this is sort of what I'd like to see if they ever did a Skyrim movie.
You know what? I actually kind of see that. You have the dark, atmospheric, snowy landscape, as well as a giant castle in the background. It is very akin to Skyrim. Though you could argue Skyrim took cues from medieval epics like Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, Lord of the Rings, and so forth to achieve that aesthetic.
Definitely. There's so much that we see in movies and stories that has been inspired by things that have come before it.
When the old lord is dead, they will drive you out. When the bishop is dead, it is certain.
And you take my property.
What do you think he's talking about, Richards, when the priest says that when the lord or the bishop dies, Balin will be driven out of the village? What do you think he means by that?
I think it means I'm going to be bishop next, and I don't want you here, so I will push you out.
Okay.
That could be what it means, but I guess it could also mean they don't want someone who they think could be a godless man, because they were very superstitious back then.
And it's been made clear that Balin has abandoned his faith.
I don't think he has fully lost his faith. He's just having a bit of a crisis of faith at the moment.
I think that's probably more accurate. Yes.
He's basically asking himself, what kind of god would take, my wife and my child the way he did?
Oh, what she does there without a head.
Well, the
Imagine
answer that
having-
some would have... Oh, sorry, Richard.
Imagine if they got the burning of the forge wrong, and it's like, oh, someone's injured, someone's got their eyebrows burned off. Can we rebuild that?
Yeah. And to be honest, there was a great deal of Schadenfreude in the way the priest is stabbed with a burning sword and then shoved into the flames. Something
Yeah.
so satisfying about it.
What were you going to say then, Rod?
I was going to say that the answer that some would say about, why would a god let, bad things happen would be, oh, because God works in mysterious ways.
Good point.
And I don't subscribe to that. In other commentaries
I'm
we've
more
done, I've made my feelings known towards religion.
I'm more agnostic than anything else, but I could certainly see how one of religious upbringing may interpret Balian's leaving the village to join with the Crusaders as some sort of higher power at work. And it's also worth bearing in mind Lord of the Rings does have fairly subtly integrated religious connotations, arguably the best I've seen in a work of fiction, to be honest.
You come to kill me.
And that's the thing I feel about it. Like, you see movies where they do imagery like that, even in Superman films, and that I don't mind that kind of stuff because I frame it as fictional anyway. So it's sort of like when a piece of fiction uses something else I consider fiction, it's just basically, it's something I can still enjoy the rest of the thing. It doesn't ruin it.
True that in Jerusalem I can erase my sins and those of my wife. Is it true?
Of course, I just don't like evangelical
Out together.
or things being taken to that sort of extreme.
Show me your hand.
I love that line. I once fought 2 days of an arrow through my testicle.
I love that line. Just realised, while I love Kingdom of Heaven, it isn't quite as funny as Gladiator, though lines like that really do offer some appreciated reprieve from the subject material.
Yeah, and again, humour like that, which feels natural and rehearsed, instead of, like, oh, you laugh at this is funny. That's the kind of humour I prefer.
Yes.
And the thing is too, like back in these days, there was humour. I mean, humour is not something that was just invented in modern times. I think some people take for granted the fact that humour is something that's existed for quite some time, even before, the 20th century.
His hand is hurt, my lord. I once fought 2 days.
Okay, I actually think that people in the 1940s, at around the same time the Looney Tunes were created, had an incredible sense of humour.
Actually, speaking of that, to go off on a tangent, that's the style I prefer with Looney Tunes. The more modern ones, I don't gel with that. I like the whole thing with that sort of era.
That actor playing the German, I can't remember his name, but he was at the time the strongest man in the world.
He looks like he could have been the strongest man of in 2005.
Definitely, yeah. Ridley Scott said he dual wielded a sword and an axe completely effortlessly, and didn't need as much training as the other actors. In fact, nowhere near as much, because swords are basically heavy weights anyway, and he's a weightlifter.
Could have been an alternative Thor actor, maybe.
Could have been, yes. Also, I didn't notice him until now, but that's Kevin McKidd as the English sergeant who accompanies the Crusaders, better known as Varinus from HBO's Rome series.
I like Kevin McKidd. I don't think he's the greatest actor, but he's very good at playing tough guys.
I feel much the same way as well. That's why he fits so well into series like Rome or movies like that, or like Kingdom of Heaven.
He was great in Dog Soldiers too.
Yeah, as Private Cooper.
He also voices a character in the Call of Duty Modern Warfare series of games too, I believe.
Now, in these days, this kind of thing happened all the time. Lords and barons and whatever, they would fight over literally nothing. You know, the medieval was times were very brutal and violent, and I'm glad they didn't shy away from showing just how brutal it could be.
Again, I think this sort of film is where you need to show violence for what it is for the times.
Yeah, very dirty. You know, it's hand to hand with swords and daggers, and you know, the Muslim guy, he's using a scimitar, I think.
Yes, he is actually. Actually, the Moorish escort, he reminds me of Morgan Freeman's character in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Like you said, there is a real brutality to these fights, Richard, and something that Ridley Scott is so effortlessly able to film in movies like this.
Yep, it's the kind of film where he's very much in his element as a storyteller.
Did you know that before Orlando Bloom was considered, Russell Crowe was actually going to be Balian at one point?
I guess he could have worked, but he might have been a bit too old to play Balian.
Do you think so?
Yeah. They needed someone who was a bit younger, I think.
And again, here's an out there idea for you. If Russell Crowe was Balian, but Orlando Bloom was Robin Hood in Ridley Scott's take on the character.
Yeah, I can see that. Again, kind of coming back to an actor who everyone compares to Orlando Bloom. Just cast Luke Evans as Robin Hood already. Come on.
Yes.
That would be interesting to see, actually.
The closest we got was Bard the Bowman, so I guess that's near enough.
I'd even wager he'd be good for a Castlevania movie, because I think there's great potential in that franchise as a film franchise too.
Now, what I like about this scene is how the captured French knights, it's like, you can ransom me, you know, for my life. And Godfrey's like, yes we can, but we're not going to. Again, that's just the way how it was back then.
The way he says it, it sounds like Wodja Okumie. Again, a very Monty Python sounding little bit.
Yeah, I heard on the commentary for this film that the actor had a lisp, and Ridley Scott asked him to play it up a little bit.
That was amazing.
Yeah. And yeah, we had the Knights Hospitaller Order, who were basically monks and knights and doctors all rolled into one. Like, they knew how to treat battle wounds, which I think they learnt a lot of that from their time in the Middle East, from the Muslims.
That does make sense, really.
I am accorded the privilege of ransom.
This is true.
And what's interesting is Balian was a real life historical figure, but all they knew about him was he was the commander of the garrison that defended Jerusalem against Saladin, and he surrendered the city to Saladin, but aside from that, nobody knows anything else about him. So really all they did with this film was just basically make up a story and background for him.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. Also, I think they chose to name his father Godfrey after the original French knight who conquered Jerusalem in the in the 9th or 11th, 10th century.
Yeah, they did.
It's really been a while since I've read up on the Crusades, so my history is a little rusty at the moment.
And the Guy de Lusignan, he was the
Guy de
future
Lusignan.
king of Jerusalem at the time, and he was obviously another historical figure. But I think they added a few things and embellished a couple of things as well. I mean, part of me thinks maybe the real Guy was never as evil as he's portrayed in this film, but for me that's not really an issue with the film itself.
No, I don't think he might have been as evil, but he was still the same king who led thousands of men to their death at the Battle of Hattin.
Through the desert without any water at the hottest time of the year.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
An infidel.
Great idea.
Pope has said is not murder. It is the path to heaven.
No, it's like Ridley Scott once said. He said, "I'm a movie maker, not a documentarian. I try to hit the truth."
But do you think this also... What do you think is about this film that escapes the same issue that I personally had with Braveheart, about balancing a good story with historical accuracy?
Well, for one thing, this actually looks like it's taking place in the time it's meant to be taking place in.
Exactly. Yes, I feel the exact same way. I never got that feeling for much of Braveheart.
Well, wasn't it in Braveheart too that didn't they get the kilts much later than what was shown in the movie?
They did about 300 or 400 years after.
Right.
So yeah, if a film generally feels like it's representing the time it's meant to be showing, then I don't have an issue if they change a couple of things. But if you do what Mel Gibson did, then yeah, we need to talk.
Yes, I think that ought to be the general rule of thumb for these historical epics.
And again, it's not a documentary. It's not trying to... I mean, I know that's a bit of an age-old cop-out argument, but it's true. This isn't a documentary, and if you want the absolute truth, then go read a book or something.
True.
We've got
I
that
love
balance
this visual of... Sorry.
That's all right. You've got that balance between historical accuracy plus entertainment value and story and thematic. You know, there's just so many other elements to consider with a film that, you know, sometimes you just can't be 100% accurate. You might be able to be 50 to 70%.
We passed it a while back, but I really love the visual of the knights walking through the busy Italian port city, and then the visual of the sea and the sky and the ships. That was so picturesque. When it comes to me writing my own fantasy books, I usually use Ridley Scott's Gladiator or Kingdom of Heaven as a visual frame of reference.
I know for a fact they used this location in Game of Thrones.
Do you know for which Game of Thrones location?
It's one of the ports. One of the ports in Essos.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, I can't actually pinpoint where exactly, so...
You know, all this kind of thing just makes me wish Ridley Scott could direct something Game of Thrones related.
I'd love to see him direct a movie about the rise of the Targaryen dynasty.
That would be epic. That would literally be epic.
Yeah, I think that would be Lord of the Rings territory there in terms of epic storytelling scope and Ridley Scott's own directorial chops.
Interesting to think we got two Lord of the Rings actors here. We got Martin, well, I never know how to say his name, Martin Sokas and
yes.
Orlando Bloom, because Martin Sokas played King Celeborn in Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
When we took the Holy Land, we took the Saracen trading ports.
They discuss the philosophy behind the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and Having watched this film a fair number of times, Richard, what's your take on it?
And Italy becomes rich.
My take on the philosophy?
The philosophy that Balian and Godfrey discuss.
You know, I think that's the kind of world we need, where everyone has their own beliefs and take on God, which I think everybody has a right to think, and a world of tolerance and peace. You know, everything that's going on in the world today with the problems in the Middle East and the whole thing between Israel and Palestine and all the rest of it, it makes you think that, you know, this happened almost 1,000 years ago now, and we're still grabbing each other's throats and killing each other over something so petty as having a different view on what God and what religion is supposed to be, and the fact that there was a peace even back then between the different sects of religion at the time, and the fact that we can't even do that now, it just makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Indeed.
It does, and but there's also that factor of one group wanting the other to convert to them, and I think one of the reasons why these sorts of things are still plaguing us as human beings nowadays is because there's that desire to turn one group into what the other group is.
It's really quite humbling to see Godfrey in such a weakened state, just as he begins the knighting ritual for Balian.
Yeah, I mean, if you're seeing this film for the first time, you might think Liam Neeson would be in it for longer, but I think this was the first time I ever saw him die in a movie.
So die, but also not come back at the same time?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like, because he does die. Oh, yeah, I just remembered he does die in Narnia, doesn't he? As Aslan.
That's right, which also incidentally came out this same year in 2005. And he very famously died as Qui-Gon Jinn. Though you could argue he comes back as a Force ghost.
Oh, I completely forgot about the Phantom Menace. Yeah, of course he gets killed off in that.
Then again, not a lot of people want to remember Phantom Menace, so...
And don't forget to Ra's al Ghul.
Okay, so maybe he's died a few more times than we've given him credit for. But I think this movie might be the exception that that Godfrey does not come back as a ghost or reincarnation or hallucinations.
No.
So there is that.
So yeah, Narnia, Batman Begins, and this movie. Liam Neeson had quite the career boost, didn't he?
Yeah,
in 2005.
I know.
I mean, when was Taken? That was 2007, wasn't it? The first one.
2008, yeah.
2008, yeah. So it's, and then you've got I didn't mind the A-Team. I actually quite enjoy that movie, and he was Hannibal in the A-Team movie. Came out in 2010.
What I like about this film is it kind of makes the argument both for does God exist and does God not exist, because when Balian survives the shipwreck, you could think, does God have a purpose for him here? Was his life meant to be spared?
Indeed, and of course, part of the brilliance of the direction is that it's kept ambiguous, that you may interpret it however way you like.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, it's interesting watching this movie. I'm a big fan of the Assassin's Creed games, and the first game takes place in the Crusades, and there's obviously a lot of imagery that I'm really loving in this because it's obviously of the same period. And with Orlando Bloom wearing that hood, I just couldn't help but think of an assassin.
Yeah, I can see why.
Who knows? Maybe if Assassin's Creed was made closer to Kingdom of Heaven, he could have been Ezio.
Ezio or Altair.
Or Altair, yes.
Well, come to think of it, he could even be still in the Assassin's Creed series. I think if the first movie is successful, they want to do more. So you never know.
And again, location shooting. They went to Morocco, which more or less passes for what country is it where Jerusalem's located?
Okay, I know it's general location, but I can't exactly pin the modern day state where it's based.
Okay, well they couldn't go to Israel itself.
No,
Israel/Palestine itself, because for one thing, Jerusalem's changed too much to look the way how they wanted it to. So they went to Morocco, which filled in quite nicely for, it looks like the kind of desert and place you'd expect the city to be located at the time.
True.
I want to say
also,
too
I
that
checked.
I want to say too that the Prince of Persia movie, I think they might have filmed it in Morocco too.
Seems to be a very favoured place by filmmakers looking for a desert landscape, because I think, didn't George Lucas also film his scenes on Tatooine there?
No, that was in Tunisia.
Oh, Tunisia, right. Sorry.
But I think they filmed Lawrence of Arabia in Morocco.
Oh. It definitely has a bit of a legacy with
It's one of those Arab countries that's a bit more open to the West and more welcoming of the West, and therefore a bit more open to film crews as well.
Indeed.
It's interesting because in the Exorcist movie, they got permission to film at the locations for the opening scene, but on the condition that they would teach the civilians there how to make fake blood and all that kind of effect stuff.
Example of the way how filmmaking can be an incredible collaborative process if you allow it to be.
Exactly. But these locations, they look great, and it really keeps you in the world of the film. You can't really look at that and sort of, unless you actually live in that exact location, I suppose. But it's amazing with films how so many different places that can be the same in each movie, but they're filmed so differently that they don't seem to be the same.
I just like the fact that we got another future Game of Thrones actor, Alexander Siddig, who plays Dorian Martell in Game of Thrones.
Oh yes, he does. Wow.
And before this, he was in stuff like Star Trek.
So he's quite a prolific actor, isn't he?
He is, yeah. What do you guys think of this scene where he doesn't kill the servants?
I think this is a great way of demonstrating Balian's strength of character, in that even though he does kill the Arabian Knights, he still feels merciful enough to keep the knight's servant alive.
He knew him at Damascus. I am the new one.
And let's be honest, they did try to accost his horse and kill him and leave him for dead.
Now, one of the criticisms against this film is that the peace they showed between Christians and Muslims was overplayed. But that doesn't make any sense to me, because I know for a fact at the time Jerusalem was an open city to everyone. And yeah, the peace was tenuous, but it was there. And, the Arabs and Westerners did trade with one another, and all that kind of thing. So I can't help but feel as though people are, just looking for, stuff to criticize in that regard.
I think in that case
well
they're probably looking at it from just a modern perspective. They're not trying to put themselves in the time period and think that things were different. They weren't exactly the same as they are now. So I think maybe that's probably where some of their criticisms are coming from, is that sort of place of, well, why this piece is stupid, why are they showing this much of this piece when it's not true? Maybe not true for now, but, true back then.
It's just one of those unfortunate things when someone tries to act like they know the subject material when they obviously don't have the knowledge to back it up.
Yes.
The annoying habit of trying to act smarter than you really are.
I have to say, if there's another thing this film does better than another Mel Gibson movie, is that it shows the journey to where Jesus Christ was supposedly crucified a lot better than Passion of the Christ, which was let's be honest, torture porn.
Yeah.
Quite a gory movie, based on a fictional account.
Which some people actually think is showing actual footage from the crucifixion. But let's
I felt closer to God watching Deadpool.
Very good Bosch.
Little side note, Harry Gregson Williams also did the score for the Prince of Persia film.
He did, and he also did the score for the first Narnia film.
I'm your prisoner. Your slave.
Oh, this is a busy year for him then.
I've been a slave.
Prince of Persia was Prince of Persia was a long while after 2005, but yes, 2005 with Kingdom of Heaven and Narnia was one of his best years, I would say.
He also worked on the Metal Gear Solid games, I believe, too. I'm not sure how
Yeah,
many,
he did.
but yeah.
His name was Muhammad al-Fais. I will pray for him.
And I think his most recent score was for The Martian, which, I have to be honest, I didn't really find it that memorable. I love The Martian, but the score was sort of more of a background piece, and didn't leap out to me as much as the scores for Kingdom of Heaven and the first Narnia film did.
Old man, where is it that Christ was crucified?
Well, I quite like this sort of Middle Eastern Persian kind of music. It's one of the things that makes me like things like the Prince of Persia games and the Golden Voyage of Sinbad and all that kind of thing.
It definitely has a strong atmospheric feel to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
That fountain is in Assassin's Creed. I'm sure Rod remembers that fountain as well.
I do, yes. There's quite a few locations here that remind me of the Assassin's Creed games, and yeah.
Just goes to show the amazing amount of work they put in the Assassin's Creed games.
Well, it is, and like a lot of other games that are set in the past, the developers and the creative teams visit these locations and actually take photographs for reference and that kind of thing. So it's not always just sitting from their computer far away and Google searching images to find references. They sometimes actually go to the locations.
There they're playing on Orlando Bloom's sex appeal a little bit by showing off his abs.
A little bit, yes. Not to mention all of the over-enthusiastic young maidens around him.
Objectification!
I'm triggered.
I don't relate to him because I don't have abs. But not because, I don't exercise enough to get abs or anything. I should have been granted with them automatically. Gotta watch these Templars.
You must have known him.
What?
Since you carry Godfrey's sword. You must have known him.
I almost forgot that Ava Green was in this, Sibylla.
A man my size.
Oh, trust me, she is easily one of the most memorable aspects of this movie for me, for various reasons.
Yes.
Awesome, she's quite a fox.
I'll say.
And she did Casino Royale right after this.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Actually,
And
one
even
of
though
the... Yeah?
so even though Kingdom of Heaven wasn't as well received as it should have been at the time, due to the wrong version of the film being released, this was, I think, her breakout year as well.
I actually didn't mind her in the Tim Burton movie. What was it called? The one with Johnny Depp as a vampire. I can't quite remember.
Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows. Yeah, I thought she was one of the great highlights of that movie. Aside from looking smoking hot in that movie, just her whole attitude and just the way she played it.
She also makes quite an engaging arrival as well, with the very opulent Arabian attire, as well as the way she looks at Balian as well.
Quite a few Westerners did that. If they lived in that part of the world for a long time, they realised that their standard clothing wouldn't keep them cool sufficiently enough, so they adopted the way how the Arabs dressed. 'Cause, their country, they're used to that kind of weather. They know how to stay cool.
Indeed, they did, and clearly they learned the right lessons in the process.
I like how David Thewlis is basically Balian's guardian angel.
He is in a way, and it's also the Hospitaller character is something of an enigma in that he seems to be the most morally forthright character in the film, but he also doesn't have a name, and he also, appearance-wise, he also matches a lot of tapestry depictions of angels with blonde hair and very straight, well-kept facial hair.
Yep, because he doesn't have a name either.
Exactly. And what he says to
oh, sorry, go on.
and what he says to Balian about holiness being here and here, pointing to the heart and the head. I'm not religious, but I still consider those words to live by.
You happen to see Balian, the son of Godfrey.
So you wanted to say something?
Well, I have to say thank God for this movie, because it's great when a great actor like Jeremy Irons rebounds from something like Aragon and does this.
Oh yes.
because he is a good actor, and when he ends up in something terrible like Aragon or Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, why, Jeremy?
It's always a tragedy to see great actors wasted in such a fashion.
But here, it's a very Shakespearean-esque role for Jeremy, and that's the kind of thing he's best at.
Well, you never know. Jeremy might redeem himself as a actor in a video game movie with Assassin's Creed, because he's actually been cast as Alan Rickon, the head of Abstergo.
I actually forgot he was in Assassin's Creed. Wow.
And what do you guys think of him in this movie?
I think he's awesome. He seems to have a lot of dry, snarky humour and unfolding beneath the surface.
Yeah, I like how the Arab trader says, I do my job to make money, not to associate with Christians. They're like, but you will take Christian gold. Gold is gold. Yes, of course.
Yes, indeed, gold is gold.
Also, this may or may not be a knowing illusion on Ridley Scott's part, but Tiberius actually has a scar across his the right-hand side of his face. Not unlike another scarred character that Jeremy played.
Ah, Scar, Lion King.
Quite.
Well, I don't think he's going to sing "Be Prepared," unfortunately.
Oh no.
And don't forget too that Scar starts with S, and so does the name Simon in Die Hard 3.
Oh yes. Well, in this case, I really do think portraying Tiberius was a Scar was a very subtle allusion to the role, without overwhelming us with a more blatant reference.
Well, I mean, they could have given him a pet lion.
Yeah, that would have just been stupid. But knowing Ridley Scott, he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Irons is the kind of great actor who's just made a couple of questionable choices.
I feel the same way.
And some might say this was one of them, but I don't think it is.
No, they're wrong. This is definitely one of the great choices he made. Yes, the theatrical cut was a botched version, but this version, one we have, is the one to have.
I wish they could re-release this widely in cinemas.
I wish they would.
As the film was intended to be.
Yeah. I mean, it could happen in the next few years, but at the same time, I just don't see it happening for some reason.
Unless they do a Ridley Scott marathon sometime and re-release a few of his movies and.
I like how Guy, he's basically saying, I am the king already.
Yeah, it's at least wait for the original king to pass, you bastard.
He's just planning ahead.
Yep, and to be fair, he's not exactly bad at planning ahead.
Yeah, he wants to start the Crusade Wars again.
Quite.
You got Christians like Balian and Tiberius and the Hospitaller. Then you got Guy and Reynard de Chatillon, who were the warmongers.
Precisely.
That's what I like about this film. It does, as you said, it does show good and bad on both sides. Because there were people who wanted peace, and there were people who wanted war and more power on both sides as well.
It's also the realization, based on what Balian and Tiberius have observed, that they are incredibly outmatched as far as numbers go against the Muslims.
Yeah, Saladin's got 200,000 men for one thing.
Yes.
And I believe there was a king of England at this time who wanted an excuse to go to war in the Middle East.
Would his name be Richard?
Yes, Richard the Lionheart.
Yep.
He wanted to go and fight in the Crusades ever since he was a prince, basically.
Yeah, so obsessed he was for fighting that he didn't even learn how to rule his own kingdom properly, let alone learn the native language.
No, because some think he was French.
He was French. Well, he's pretty much French by birth and upbringing. He didn't speak a single word of English.
You sit at my table.
Is it not the king's table?
Is it? I have not seen a king at it for some years.
Now, out of the historical epics that Ridley Scott has done, Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, and, well, Robin Hood, how do you guys rank these three movies?
I have business
I think I would say Kingdom of Heaven is number one. Gladiator comes in at a close second, and Robin Hood is third.
Well, I actually haven't seen Robin Hood, so I can't judge it properly. But I do give a little bit of an edge to Gladiator for its emotional pull and its incredibly sweeping, but still very human story. This this is still a magnificent film, but it does I think it wanders a little bit. I feel like it does steep us so much in the time and the place that the forward momentum that Gladiator had is lost slightly. That isn't to say I don't like it. I love this film, I really do, but that's the one reason why I would give the edge to Gladiator.
No, that's fair enough. And to think, when I first saw this, I didn't know that was Edward Norton playing Baldwin IV, the King of Jerusalem.
Indeed, and I don't think many of us did.
I think he wanted to remain uncredited.
Did he? Why is that?
You know, so people wouldn't guess that it was him, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny why they do that sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's done for creative purposes, like with Seven, Kevin Spacey's name isn't even in the credits. I think it is in the final credits, but you don't know he's in the movie before you see it. The reason
I love that line. Oh, I love that line where he says, "You cannot do something," and they make the excuse for saying, "Oh, God told me to do that."
Definitely not.
I love that line as well. Another example of how Baldwin was one of the few truly good, truly honourable Christians, or Christian knights at least, or kings in this film, because he understood how the two creeds could coexist, but only by cohabitation.
It takes a bit of skill to actually be an actor and act through a mask, because the mask itself can get in the way of a performance sometimes, but a really good actor can really sell the character behind the mask.
And even though his eyes are a little obscured, you still get a definite sense of character and emotion through his body language.
There's actually
He also has a very
movie. Oh, sorry, Oscar.
Sorry. He also has a very serene, mystical air about him as the king. Despite being physically weak, he still has a great deal of majesty to him.
Now I know I shall not see 30.
And that's one way which he's able to leave a strong impression, despite his limited appearances. Sorry, Rod, would you like to continue?
Yeah, no, it was just a quick anecdote. The movie The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, there's an actor who has a mask on, and he's been disfigured underneath. And the actor who plays him, I don't know his name, but he really sells the performance of the character even though he's got a mask on.
I saw that movie, and I actually completely agree with you. I was surprised by the decidedly more mature edition of a deformed king with a mask. It did remind me of Kingdom of Heaven, but in a good way.
Nice.
Also, another key part of the film that was cut out for theatrical releases was Sibylla's son, Baldwin V, unless I'm mistaken. This comes into play later on, but I will say for now that the inclusion of the Little Prince was absolutely essential and shouldn't have been omitted.
Yeah, the film crew, they wanted to keep that in, but the studio said no. And again, it makes you think, who is smoking what amongst the higher ups at Fox?
Tom Rothman.
Yes, I was about to say that too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him. Yeah, Tom Rothman. Well, yeah, there you got it on a plate in just one name, Tom Rothman.
Yes, he's now at Sony now.
Oh god, yeah, I think it shows.
It's very evident in the recent Ghostbusters trailers. That's what's happened.
indeed.
But back to this. One thing that this film absolutely excels in is the combination of incredible real-life locations, convincing sets, and sterling CGI. All a combination of tools in the toolbox to immerse us in the Middle East in the 12th century. Even something as quiet and atmospheric as Balin arriving at his father's estate, it still reminds me of how drawn in I am into this world.
I love this little scene because it shows Christians, Jews, and Muslims working together.
Exactly.
It makes you stop and think: have we really gone so backwards from this in almost a 1,000 years or so? Just makes you. I think that's one reason why people didn't like this film, because it holds up a mirror to our world and makes us stop and think.
Quite likely, yes. But at the same time, we shouldn't really interpret Balin's success on his land as a representative of the entirety of Europe in the 12th century.
Yeah, that's true. It just shows you the kind of world that could be if we just put aside our petty differences just for a little bit.
The scene on the estate is very much a microcosm of that ideal, even with the war and enmity between Christians and Muslims represented everywhere else in the film.
All these locations, both the external ones and the interior, is just so much attention to detail.
Apparently, they had a lot of trouble with the Arab children because filming takes a long time, and the children, they would get bored easily and cause a bit of mischief on the set.
That must have been a very difficult thing for Ridley to try and control. Can't say I envy any director in that position. What's the famous phrase? Never work with animals and children?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, there's children, and there's also horses and sheep and other livestock on this scene, so it makes it even more difficult.
Your father was important. His lands were not.
Yes, there's a lot of waiting on film sets.
I wonder how long this would have taken to film between showing a convincing construction of the irrigation system, as well as the various takes and retakes that had to be assembled to get the right version of the film.
What we do not have is water.
It's one of those aspects of watching the movie that always intrigues me.
Well, I mean, you've got so much choreography. You've got the cameras that are moving when there's camera movement, plus the action and the timing of when certain actions need to happen, and there's just so many variables that have to be controlled all at once. It's like juggling, 10 different sauces on sticks.
Pretty much.
I like the way how Bailey, and he refuses to have his shoes taken off for him. Just goes to show that he still has his peasant background with him. He's not used to being waited on and stuff like that.
And of course, we also see that earlier with the awkwardness of being bathed and dried by the servant girls in his Jerusalem estate.
Stone the walls.
Yep, there's a definite sense of him being unused to this sort of treatment. Could you guys excuse me for a sec?
What do you think of this scene, Rod, between Sibylla and Balian?
Well, I haven't actually seen this movie before, Rich, so this is my first time viewing. But Eva Green is definitely a mesmerising actress. It doesn't matter what role she's been in that I've seen her in. She's basically, you can't keep your eyes off her.
I think she definitely has chemistry with Orlando Bloom.
Sorry about that. Had to see to a distraction. Sorry.
That's fine.
Where Jesus changed water to wine.
I said to Rod, Oscar, asked him what he thought of this scene. I was wondering what you thought of this scene as well.
You mean between Balian and Sibylla?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's lovely. I think it's very well shot and has a great deal of peace, serenity, as well as decent chemistry between the two actors.
Yeah, because
you get the sense that she is very much intrigued by him. He brings such idealism to Jerusalem, yet he is not of a knightly upbringing.
Yeah, I mean, this was intended from the beginning to be a character-driven movie, and the fact that they cut out so much character stuff when it first came out really did the film a disservice, because it wasn't a meat-headed action movie directed by the guy who did Gladiator with Orlando Bloom. It was something more than that.
It'd be kind of like if Universal asked Steven Spielberg to direct another dinosaur movie that wasn't Jurassic Park, but then take out all of the science behind it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which, believe it or not, in the 90s, when Universal was trying to reboot King Kong with Peter Jackson, they actually wanted to have more dinosaur action and less emphasis on Kong. Basically, it would have been more akin to their Jurassic Park franchise.
Oh, there you go then. And really, this was, in fact, the movie that Ridley Scott had always wanted to make. He'd always wanted to do an epic set during the Crusades. And yeah, while this wasn't 100% successful at the time, I'll always give him credit for sticking to his guns and doing the movie he always wanted to do. Because not many directors get to do that.
And of course, historical epics are very, very hard to get right. I mean, you may have the ambition and the aspiration for it, but if you don't know how to pace yourself or how to shoot the right things or write in the right character beats, it's going to get lost in itself. And of course, he's able to do it. He was able to do it with Gladiator. He was able to do it again with Kingdom of Heaven.
Yes, that's right, Oscar. Ridley Scott did it twice in regards to making the historical epic popular again with Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven.
I have to say, I really enjoyed these very tender, very sweet scenes between Sibylla and Balian. It's very understated, but quite pleasant in its own way. It's also it's also interesting to see the contrast between Sibylla and Balian. Balian, who was pretty much brought up all of his life as a blacksmith, a tradesman, not a knight, and yet here he is in the standing of this very beautiful queen, and she regards him just as highly as she may her brother or some of her best knights.
I'm sorry, but Eva Green is one of these mesmerising actresses. You get lost in her face.
Yes, that is true. Every time she smiles, you get butterflies in your stomach.
Yeah, you look at her and you think, yeah, she was she was meant to be a movie star.
And you also look at Orlando Bloom and go, "You lucky bastard."
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Another way in which Balian's province contradicts with Jerusalem is the fact that he allows Jews, Christians, and Muslims to coexist, whereas Jerusalem is becoming increasingly strained in that regard.
Well, it shows you the idealistic world that we could have if we were more tolerant of each other's beliefs, I guess.
I'd say so.
And also if we didn't want to try and convert everyone else to our beliefs too.
Which, of course, it does seem to be a fundamental problem with both Christianity and Islam. In that there are many people amongst them who do try to forcefully convert.
Well, that's what this film does. It does make you think and discuss these kind of things, which was really the film's intention, to generate discussion and to get people talking. Make them ask themselves, what do you believe? How tolerant are you, and just how accepting are you of what other people choose to believe.
I wonder how many months have passed between Balian arriving at his province and the land blossoming into this beautiful oasis.
A couple, I should imagine.
And of course, Sibylla is apparently a frequent visitor there. And I don't blame her. With a beautiful plot of land like this, I'd be a frequent visitor too.
I wonder what they did for mouse traps back then.
Yes, to be honest, that shot of the mouse always confused me. At least in the context of the movie. I believe there is a general rule that Ridley Scott adheres to with regards to sex scenes and how he's not usually one for filming them. Isn't that true, Richard?
Yeah, he says, exact quote unquote, sex is boring unless you're doing it.
Well, let's see if I agree with him in full time.
And I like the fact that there is quite a strong romance between Sibylla and Balian, and it doesn't feel like for me. It doesn't feel like your standard romance. Like, they meet up and they love each other. That's it. It feels like it's quite natural and a genuine part of the film.
Most romances are not these over-the-top, over-emotional affairs, are they?
Not really, no. And as you said earlier, there has been a passage of time. Maybe she has visited Ibelin quite a few times. So, this has had time to, blossom, as it were.
Yeah, I can cross over there into... Sorry.
I do think Sorry.
I think a large part of their romance was cut out of the theatrical version as well. But that's me vaguely remembering, because I can't remember the last time I saw the theatrical version. This version of the film is the only one that I watch.
While Ridley Scott himself said he's not really one for sex scenes, I do like that he does give a little bit, and shows us a little bit of the intercourse between Balian and Sibylla.
Yeah.
It's tasteful, and it's suited to the tone.
And now we get what the Crusades are mostly remembered for. Pretty much what defined the Crusades, which was more often than not, the Templars going out and causing violence.
I believe it's been suggested that the aggressiveness of the Templars in this film is played up compared to their historical counterparts. In terms of violence, I'm not so sure, but in terms of how much they provoked the Muslims, who knows?
Well, they believed in fighting the devil with swords, and to them Muslims were the devil.
True. From a modern perspective, this all seems like complete and utter madness, attacking an innocent caravan and knowing that this will bring nothing but war and destruction.
Well, that's what happens when you get people who just have too much pride in themselves and they're overconfident and think they're doing what their God is telling them to do, which, I mean, let's be honest, I don't think there's ever been an instance where God has ever directly told anyone to do anything. They're just using that as an excuse to get more land and get more wealth.
It's also quite telling that Reynald de Chatillon has a Muslim helmet that he probably stole off one of them he killed at some point.
Yeah, that's very possible. Yeah,
goes to shows that they're more like pillagers than real knights. At least real knights in the typical understanding. This film really does bring a sledgehammer to the image of a quote unquote true knight.
When back then knights were basically guys with a little bit too much time on their hands who love to fight, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and they could just say, yeah, God told me I could do all this.
Or maybe more so the Pope at the time.
It's also makes me a little more glad to see Sibylla cheating on Guy de Lusignan with Balian, considering what a bastard he is.
You have to admit, though, Martin Sokas is very good in this film. It's a shame he doesn't get more big roles like this one.
He is magnificent, and it's hard to imagine why he keeps being relegated to minor supporting roles, unlike in this film where he really is front and center, along with Orlando Bloom and Eva Green. I have to say, every time Jeremy Irons argues with one of the Templars, you're always on his side 100%. He has that much conviction in himself.
It's actually quite interesting because I've probably mentioned Assassin's Creed before in relation to this movie, and I know that game obviously takes liberties with a lot of things, so I don't take everything as fact, but I find it quite interesting that Jeremy Irons here is arguing against Templars, and in the film Assassin's Creed, he's actually playing the head of the Templars in modern day.
Well, that is interesting.
It's a connection.
Another connection some Assassin's Creed fans like to point out is the similarity between the Templar Order in the 18th century and the East India Trading Company in Pirates of the Caribbean, in how vehemently they've pursued the pirates to the brink of extinction.
Yes, well, that's actually part of the plot for Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. In terms of the Templars going after pirates.
A lot of work goes into the Assassin's Creed games to try and be as accurate as possible, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
To a large extent, yes.
Yeah, I mean, they choose certain historical figures to turn into bad guys, but I think they probably do so with real life people who had a tendency to do bad things. So I don't think they're making any good people out to be bad guys.
And we get Kerak Castle, which was never taken. It was said that you could have a garrison of just 100 men, and you could attack the castle with 10,000 men, and the garrison of 100 men would hold out.
Now that does sound incredible. I don't think there are very many fortresses, historical or otherwise, that could be defended like that. And based on its visualization here, it looks magnificent.
Obviously, that's CGI, but it's damn good CGI.
Exactly. It's my feeling as well.
Yeah, like any tool in filmmaking, it's how it's used. It's not the tool in itself that's good or bad, it's just how it's used and how it's accomplished the things that they want to do.
I love the upcoming little battle scene, and it's a scene which they probably didn't need to put in, but I'm glad it's there because it feels it's exciting, and it shows how Balin and his men have balls of steel, because even Almaric, his second in command, says we cannot attack that and live, but they attack the Saracen cavalry anyway.
It also goes to show the strength of the character in Balin by buying time for the other farmers and outsiders of the castle to find refuge.
And it's interesting as well. Like, I know Kerak Castle can be a tough nut to crack because I have played medieval Total War. I have laid siege to that castle, and yes, it is quite the intimidating, near impregnable fortress that took me ages to get in.
Yeah, I'd be pretty nervous if I were a knight in Balin's cavalry arm facing that huge battalion of Saracen knights.
Do you know? I think this is how I'd prefer to go out, though. You know, go out fighting.
Oh, yeah, I think in a lot of ways a lot of people would idealize facing their death with dignity and courage. But to be honest, I wouldn't know.
And we see the tactician in Balin coming out.
Like that little bit, he just kisses the sword.
Yeah.
That was a very frequent thing in medieval Europe, wasn't it? The kissing of the sword was good luck, I think.
It was, yeah.
Deliver the kiss of death upon thy enemies.
These slow motion shots of the attacking cavalry, they're some of the most impressive I've seen brought to life on film. And I know slow motion can be an overused or misused tool, but in the hands of Ridley Scott, and when in the scene we just passed, it was spot on.
Since this movie came out not long after the Lord of the Rings films had actually finished, do you think that some audiences might look at battle scenes like this and think, oh, we've seen that, and dismiss it outright instead of actually looking at the way it's filmed and all that kind of stuff, and thinking, yeah, this is actually a pretty good fight scene, how it's edited, how everything's put together?
I think it's hard to say. I think there will be a fair number of audience members who will think that way, but not everyone is as nitpicky, but not everyone will always look for the admirable qualities of filmmaking as we do in scenes such as this. Basically, it takes film criticism takes all forms, whether it's from people who do it as a job or whether it's just from casual audiences. Personally, this action scene is not only brilliantly shot and scored, but it again gives us a taste of what is to come, the desperation and almost sense of hopelessness of the Crusaders going up against the Saracen army. And of course, Balin achieved his mission. He bought enough time for the people outside of the castle to get inside.
What do you guys think of Alexander Siddig as Rashid?
I think he's actually a pretty good addition to the cast. We obviously meet him early on as the Muslim traveller who appears to be the servant of a knight. And of course, the revelation here is that he is actually an important general and commander. In many ways, it's kind of a pleasant surprise that this is the one Muslim knight that Balin happened to be captured by.
I love this shot of the two armies as, like they're saying, no, my army's bigger than yours.
In both cases, simply seeing either 100,000 strong Saracen army or a 50,000 strong Christian army with the golden cross at its head, both sides are awe-inspiring.
Yeah, I agree, and you can't really tell the CGI. It just the armies look like they're actually there.
Precisely, and that takes tremendous skill and talent as usual.
All those extras as well, in the sun, in their costumes,
baking hot as well.
I suppose the Muslim extras would have been a bit better off because they would have wore what was pretty much what they would have wore back then, which was light clothing, to help deal with the heat. But the Christians in their armor, with their chainmail and their swords. I mean, I know it was made out of that special plastic from Weta Workshop, but still, it must have been, in that heat, in that desert, it must have been hell for them to, especially if they had to stand around waiting for shots to be set up.
Pretty much.
It's like, I don't get paid enough to do this.
You wouldn't really need to be a method actor either. You'd be pretty much happening naturally.
Both armies contrasted to each other. It's a great demonstration of the manpower and strength behind both the Christian and the Muslim armies. It's a perfect visualization of a standoff.
Yeah. And I love the actor Ghassan Massoud. I think I'm saying that right. The actor who plays Saladin.
He didn't speak much English, based on what I've seen from the bonus material.
No, he didn't. But he spoke just enough to be able to deliver the lines in this film. And I've seen a couple of other films that have got Saladin as a character, and I think he's by far the best actor that's ever played Saladin.
I think you might be right. I think there was one other film about the Crusades called Arn, the Knights Templar, which had its own Saladin character, and all I could keep thinking was just how much this version from Kingdom of Heaven was so much better, more authentic, and probably more true to the character.
Now, there's a reviewer on YouTube called History Bus, and he didn't like this film. He said this film gets history wrong and all the rest of it. And he actually said Arn the Knight Templar was better because it gets history better a lot more. It gets history a lot more right than this film.
Well, once again, the difficulty of trying to balance being a great film with being a decent representation of history is one that's almost never truly struck. This is a better example than some other historical war epics I could mention, but at the same time, it's still not 100% true to the real events. It captures the feel and the atmosphere of the time, which is arguably better than being 100% true, because it allows you more flexibility to make the film you need to make.
Does it rhyme with Grave Bart?
It could do, but we'll get to that in a bit.
I love how Reynard de Chatillon says, "What are you looking at?" And I just love Jeremy Irons as Tiberius' response, which is a dead man.
I love the absolute intensity and the cold fury Balian has. Even though you can't see his face, you can tell from his body language he is livid.
Oh, you mean the king, Baldwin?
Baldwin, yes. Sorry, what did I say?
You said Balian.
Fuck. No, Baldwin. It is extremely satisfying to see Baldwin beat the shit out of Reynald.
It is, yeah, but I just love the note of satisfaction in Tiberius's voice when he says a dead man, because you can tell he's been waiting for that, waiting to arrest Reynard.
Definitely.
A comeuppance that he's wanted to give.
I also love the look of incredulity Reynald gives to being arrested. It's like, the hell? I only did what I was supposed to do.
I am Reynard de Chatillon. Well, I'm the king, so shut up.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm the one that doesn't have shit on him.
But once again, both in the scene where we meet him and as well as this scene, Edward Norton proved himself to be spot on casting as King Baldwin.
Pause.
Okay, pause now.
Yep.
Right. I'll just quickly change the discs.
Sure.
You know, I actually forgot that earlier when we started doing this, I said that it's sad that they didn't end up together, Balian and Sibylla.
But
Even
they do.
But they do, yeah. So what I'll do is I'll cut that out and.
Feel free to cut it out if you want to.
Yeah.
Sorry, we all fuck up.
After I said it, I thought to myself, actually, no. They probably do.
Well, how bad do you think I feel about calling Baldwin Balian?
Oh, that's all right.
I've seen this movie at least 20 times, if not more. I ought to know these names off the back of my hand by now.
Not to worry.
Anyway, as soon as you play through the overture, Richard, pause at the very first frame that you see, which is of the knight going across the desert.
Yeah, it is. You guys don't mind if I listen to the intro, do you?
I don't mind.
No, go ahead.
It's an awesome score.
Yeah, fair enough.
How's Audacity going for you guys?
Yeah, it seems to be working.
It's working, based on what I've seen.
Cool.
But then you'll have to pause and we'll have to synchronize playing again. Which shouldn't be too difficult.
No. I think we're managing quite well, considering we've had to not only find a place to restart, but also the new, recording with Audacity and all that kind of thing. So I think we're doing quite well.
Well, this could be a good thing. I might actually start using Audacity to do my own voice recordings for other projects.
Cool, yeah, it's one of those ones I've sort of used for a while now. I can't even remember when I first heard about it now, actually. But yeah, you can do also things like noise removal and that kind of thing too. There's all these different effects.
Yes, I'm guessing that the microphone icon controls your volume, and the speaker icon controls background noise and how much is recorded.
I mean, the funny thing is that could be it. I've always seen the volume one as just the volume of like not the volume of your voice input, but just playing it back. But now that you mention that, that's probably what it is. It makes a bit more sense for it to be that.
Well, let's hope that's the case. Or I'll be giving you a really botched audio recording, and I wouldn't have realised it.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it's one of those programs too that you can see as it's recording what it's sort of recording, which is good.
We'll have to pick up more or less what on where we were. Try to come up with the right sort of topic to kick off.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. I've paused where the thing starts. Oh.
Okay. All right. So countdown and then kick off.
So I'll just play it. Jeremy Irons is about to ride off on his horse.
Okay.
This is where I'm at. I'll send a screenshot.
Cool.
If I go quiet for a while, it's because my throat's acting up, and one of you guys will have to basically keep it going.
Yeah, that's okay, dude.
Fair enough. I'd honestly be more worried if you had to drop out for some other reason, but as long as you're still with us, then it's all right.
Don't know why I feel so rough today.
It's all right.
Okay, cool. So I see that screen grab. I'll just press play on my copy, and when it gets to that, I'll pause. Shouldn't be too far off.
So, in due course, we press the play button, do the countdown, and press the play button.
Sure thing. Yep, I'm up to the point now where the screen grab is.
Okay. Yeah. So am I. Fingers on the play button.
Awesome. Are you ready for countdown?
Yeah.
Sweet. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
You know, shots like these remind me just how much inspiration went into Kingdom of Heaven. It reminded me very much of David Lean's work on Lawrence of Arabia. That lush, incredible visualization of the desert.
I think that was filmed in Morocco as well, which was where this film was shot. But I could be wrong about that.
No, I think you might actually be right about that. It does seem to be one of the few places in North Africa which is filmmaker friendly.
Yeah, and Morocco is actually quite open to the West.
Now, I mentioned earlier about Braveheart. This is one definite example of why Kingdom of Heaven is better than that film, because the way it portrays the Muslims and the Muslim army and certain individuals, like Saladin, is orders of magnitude better than the portrayal of the English in Braveheart. Here, the Muslims, they have a sense of honor and as well as a sense of their own importance and belief in the world. But they're still human beings like you and I, not cartoonishly evil baddies.
And I guess some people just weren't ready to accept that.
They're not twirling their mustaches, that's for sure.
Nope.
Oh, and they're played by actual Middle Eastern actors as well.
That they are. Yet another arrow in this movie's quiver.
As opposed to white guys in brown face.
Well, at the same time, there have been. Let's not forget Alec Guinness. He was an Eastern character in Lawrence of Arabia, but it is 100 times more authentic when you do have people of the right sort of ethnicity playing these roles.
Yeah. Sometimes
we look at
I
Peter
do.
Sellers.
Peter Sellers, yeah. But sometimes I do like it when there's a bit of political correctness. I mean, I usually don't support political correctness, but I feel it is better to, if they can get actors to play characters who are from certain places, then yes, do it.
Well, the thing was,
sorry.
Like Peter Sellers, he played an Indian in the movie called The Party, and apparently a lot of Indian audiences really liked his performance because he was true to not only the accent, but he didn't. It wasn't him making fun of Indian people through playing an Indian person, if you know what I mean. That wasn't what the role was making fun of. It was, he was a funny character because of the misunderstandings between two cultures. And so I think sometimes it's in the hands of the audience to decide.
True. There's Reynald, literally acting up the wall.
Yeah, and I love how the jailer shuts the door and is like, "Oh, shut up! I don't care who you are."
Reynald was basically trolling the guard all along.
He was, yeah, and the guard's like, "Oh, I've had enough of you."
Yeah.
It's a great way to convey something without having to have the guy actually say "shut up" to him.
Yeah.
Exactly. This character, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, he also seems to be a pretty shady character as well, just like Guy and Reynald.
But I don't think he's an evil person necessarily.
No, I don't think he's evil, but he does appear to be very fickle and misguided. But at the same time, it just demonstrates just how far this world of corruption steeps, even in the supposed kingdom of heaven. Having seen Guy swinging his sword around like that in the hall a few scenes ago, it just goes to show the supreme delusions of grandeur he has about himself, about this invincible sword of God. That he may aspire to rule, but he is not fit to rule.
No, and basically the throne of Jerusalem is pretty much going to be his, but he's done nothing to earn that position.
Yes, there's a difference between being given responsibility and earning it.
Exactly. I'm kind of on two minds. On the one hand, I understand why this scene with him and the and this woman in red is shown to demonstrate just how morally debased he is. But on the other hand, do you think it goes too far and just comes off as gratuitous?
It's a little bit gratuitous, but I don't really mind it personally.
Yeah, I don't think it goes too gratuitous though, because we don't see the whole act taking place. But I think another angle it does show is that just because these people say they do things in the name of God doesn't mean that, they're not people that do things that, you would look at and go, well, how could you say that you're doing things for God if you do those types of things? Very hypocritical. So I think it sort of shows that aspect too, which is still a thing that goes on today with a lot of religious groups thinking that they can get away with doing things because they can say, oh, well, but, I was doing it because of God, or these sorts of things. Is like, no, you did it because you wanted to yourself. They just have the convenience of being able to blame on something else.
Every time Guy is on the same scene with Isabella, there's always a sense of uneasiness. Not just because you can sense the amount of distrust and hatred these two have for each other, but also it just emanates uncomfortableness as a whole.
In one way, she reminds me of Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones, and he reminds me a little bit of Robert Baratheon. Their relationship reminds me of the strained relationship that they had in season 1 of Game of Thrones.
I guess you could say Cersei has Guy's lust for power and ambition, while at the same time she also has Sibylla's devotion to her family, as well as her political standing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would say Robert was comparatively speaking, a more compassionate man than Guy was.
Definitely, yeah. Because Robert wasn't a bad guy, he just wasn't suited to be a king because he was a soldier.
Exactly. There is a degree of question as to whether or not Balin should have pushed a little harder to ensure Guy did not become king, even if it meant a possible assassination. And I understand why he doesn't follow through, because he wants to stay true to the principles Godfrey had taught him, as well as the principles that the Kingdom of Heaven should aspire to. But at the same time, it's still allowed for so much war and bloodshed to take place. I was wondering what you guys thought about it.
Well,
if we think, well, I think Balin just doesn't want unnecessary blood on his hands.
You could say that, and after all, he does say that his soul is his own keeping, and he is pretty much reminding the king of the same values he taught him earlier. So perhaps you could say that in this world time where your own actions determined whether or not you went to heaven, perhaps he sees himself as trying to stay true to that course. A kingdom of conscience, or nothing, as he said.
Yeah.
Do you feel differently, Rod, or similarly, perhaps?
No, I don't really feel different about it. I guess there's certain things that a person can only have a certain degree of control over and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't think he probably feels he can really do too much to stop it.
I think it's fair to say that he does not approve of the chess game politics between Sibylla and Guy.
No, it's a very risky game that they are playing. The Game of Thrones.
Quite literally in this case.
Yeah. She has a point though, because Balian probably will wish that he had done a little bad to do a little good.
Indeed, and when it comes to my writing and my own original fantasy stories, I also have this question on mind all the time when it comes to characters who are knights or princes or empresses. Especially considering that how men and women in those positions in those days had to make that decision every day.
Well, things have certainly changed a lot for equality and that kind of thing from these days.
Yeah, this was
depicted in this movie.
Yeah, this was way before feminism.
What do you think of the odd relationship between Guy and Reynald in scenes such as these?
I think you get the sense that they're plotters and they're troublemakers, and they want what they feel they're entitled to.
But at the same time, there does seem to be I guess you could say something of a genuine camaraderie between them.
Yeah, like that little moment when Guy gave Reynard some food, but then Reynard turned around and gave Guy some food back.
True.
Celeborn and Mad Eye Moody having a scene together.
Oh yes, fancy that. To be honest, even though I know these actors from other roles, I tend to get lost in their performances in this movie. They are playing the characters that they should be playing. They aren't Celeborn and Mad Eye Moody in a different movie.
Yeah, I think the Harry Potter movies. This was around about the time when I can't remember when Goblet of Fire came out, but I think this was around about when Brendan Gleeson was playing Mad Eye Moody.
I think it was. Now that I think about it,
it's just funny to think of the memes that get created today, where you have two actors who are in a movie and they've both been iconic characters in another movie based on another franchise, and then they basically put a caption like, "Remember that time when such and such and such and such were, doing this?"
Yeah.
I sort of like that sort of humour. It's like those memes where you have the actor and then you have the quote, but the person the quote's quoted from is changed to another another character they've played.
It's like for Man of Steel, Robin Hood's real and adopted father is Robin Hood. I have to say, this might be one of my favourite scenes in the movie. The final interaction between Sibylla and Baldwin. The one time where they can be brother and sister, as opposed to king and queen, pretty much. And as before, it's all down to simple emotional expressions that conveys the pathos in this scene.
It's interesting when you have actors who have to act behind a mask, and how there's a lot of actors that can actually really shine through with a performance. It reminds me of The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. There's a character who has a golden mask on his face for the majority of the movie, and the actor does such a great job that you don't need to see his face to sort of get an idea of what type of person the character is.
That's true. I did see that movie, and for what I did actually think the actor did an admirable job conveying the emotion from behind a mask. And once more, Norton's able to convey a similar strength here.
So the funny thing was, I wouldn't have known that this was Edward Norton if I had been told it was. Maybe something in his voice would make me think of him, but it's interesting to be told that it's him, and then you put two and two together and you go, oh yeah, it is.
Exactly.
And this piece of music was originally used by Ridley Scott in his previous film Hannibal, and he reused it again here.
I have to say, I haven't seen Hannibal, and I do primarily associate the music with this particular scene.
Now, like Rod, I'm a huge fan of the original Assassin's Creed game, and I'm looking at those those tall towers of Jerusalem, and I'm thinking, yes, there's a good position to synchronize the viewpoint and then do a leap of faith.
Yeah. Quite so.
It's amazing how
the architecture.
Yeah, it's amazing how they recreated Jerusalem in that game.
Well,
yeah, because
it makes
Jerusalem
me wonder.
was. Sorry, Rod.
Oh, that's all right. It makes me wonder because this came out before Assassin's Creed, and I know that they were working on another Prince of Persia, and then they turned it into Assassin's Creed after they realised they had a new franchise possibility. But I can't help but feel this movie might have influenced their decision to set Assassin's Creed in this time period.
I have no real knowledge of the history of the creation of Assassin's Creed, so you could well be right about that. This, in tandem with the previous scene between Sibylla and Baldwin, it's pretty emotional. Even though her brother lies dead right before him, even she has to. She still feels uncomfortable looking upon his true face. And not to say that anybody particularly blames her. It's just one of the difficult things you have to do.
Now, and here we get they talk about the burning bush and how that might have happened. It reminds me of how Ridley Scott would go on to direct Exodus: Gods and Kings, which featured Moses.
I still haven't seen that one yet, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Not one of his best.
I'm not a religious person, and I look at it as fiction, so...
There's also a degree of ambiguity with the Knight Hospitaller character, played by David Thewlis.
Yeah, because after the Hospitaller walks away, and Balian turns around to look at that vast, wide open desert, the Hospitaller's nowhere to be seen. It's like, where the hell did he go?
Maybe he just hopped behind a rock. Maybe he's hiding.
Trolling Balian, yeah.
But the other interesting thing is that even though it does look as though Balian set the bush alight by hitting a stone and causing a loose spark, we do see another bush catch fire. So it does seem as though that the movie is being deliberately ambiguous as to whether or not it is in favour of faith or against it.
I quite like that.
think of.
I like it too. I think it's a brilliant way of being accessible to both sides of the coin, as it were.
What were you going to say then, Rod?
Oh, it just made me think of how today we know about mental diseases and hallucinations and things like that, and it makes me think back to these times. You know, they could have just been hallucinations that people were having, and because a lot of these hallucinations happened, that are described in the Bible, happened with only one person viewing it. when you think about it in that context, it's like, yeah, there's room for it to have just been a hallucination.
Now, Baldwin, the heir to the throne and the boy king, I can't remember if he was also a leper, and if he was poisoned by his mother, but I do know, I think he did die very young. And Guy de Lusignan was the king after Baldwin IV, which was Edward Norton's character. But how much of this is true, and if they're just making stuff up, I don't really know. And to be honest, I don't really care, because this isn't a history lesson.
I think if there was a Baldwin V after the previous one, he would have. The implication both here and from what I've read is that his reign was really short, enough to have been eclipsed by either Guy or Baldwin IV.
Yeah.
Once again, Ava Green proves herself to be an absolute class act with her performance. The teary, horrified expression she gives is all that really needs to be said upon the realization of the condition that her son has.
Yeah, and it's quite a tragic and at the same time a tender moment when she has these final moments with her with her son, when she talks to him and she even sings to him, and then she pours that poison in his ear, and she just cannot handle the grief. She just cannot deal with what she's done afterwards. I mean, who could live with that? You know, I mean, it was done for humane reasons, but you know, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm not a father. I don't have any children, but I just cannot begin to imagine how any parent could live with doing that. It's pretty much the medieval equivalent of pulling the plug on a child who's in a vegetative state in hospital.
I also think that they chose pretty much the perfect child actor to represent young Baldwin here, someone who has such innocence and such frailty. Very much symbolic of the innocence lost on both sides during the Crusades. Especially since the film plays on the possibility that what's happening to the Christian kingdom here is some sort of divine punishment for the innocent Muslims slaughtered 100 years prior.
Yeah. Oh, and Ridley Scott quote unquote borrowed another piece of music from another film. This piece of music was originally composed by Graham Revell for The Crow. Although
that scene is very, very sad. I think that music's a good choice.
I'll say. Every time I watch it, I always feel like taking a little break because of how powerful it was. It was understated, but the emotion was still there.
What do you guys think of the fact that Ridley he borrows music from other movies?
I think it's one of those cases. If the less you know that he did borrow other music, the more powerful the scenes are, because we come to another example later on, but at the same time it does kind of make me think, why did he do that?
It does, yeah. And Rod, I think you said recently that sometimes when they're editing a scene, they just use a track to help edit it, and then sometimes they just leave that track in.
Yeah, like it's called a temp track. They basically put it in to the edit, and before the composer, who actually does the music, composer's music, they might take a look at it and give the composer an idea of what they are going for. And sometimes what will happen is they'll leave that in if it's ultimately decided that that piece of music that was used as temp track is good enough or suitable enough to still be in the final product.
Yeah, and I'd imagine they would have paid copyright and royalty to the original composer so they could use it.
Oh, definitely.
Probably.
I mean, they'd have to have done that.
Yeah, they couldn't get away with not doing that, I guess. Oh, and yeah, now we got Reynard doing what, and he says, what he does best, he says, "I am what I am, someone has to be." And I don't know about you guys, but I quite like that line because he knows what he is, which is a fanatical Templar who kills Muslims. At least he's honest about it. And I kind of, in a twisted kind of way, I kind of respect him for that.
Yeah, he definitely knows that what he is and that kind of thing. But then again, it's sort of like, even if people do know who they are, I definitely couldn't condone their actions either way. But I get what you mean, though, Richard. At least he's a character that does know what he is. He's not pretending to be something he's not.
Yeah. Oh, interesting tidbit. Saladin's sister is played by Ridley Scott's real-life partner, Giannina Facio. I have to say, Ridley, you lucky sod, because she's quite beautiful.
She is beautiful, and it's weird because I've seen Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven a great many times before, but I never once made the connection between Saladin's sister and Maximus's wife in both movies.
Yeah,
even though they're the same woman.
Yeah, he casts her in small roles in all of his films since Gladiator.
So who was she in Hannibal?
I can't remember, but I know she was definitely in it.
The way the scene is framed with the flowing long grass, it's very reminiscent of the Elysium scenes in Gladiator as well.
That is a good point. That's kind of what I was thinking too when I saw it.
And Guy showing just how a little bit unhinged he is by killing a messenger for no real reason.
Yes, goes to show he has all the qualifications of a great king by killing a messenger.
And starting.
That reminds me of yeah. That reminds me of 300 with "This is Sparta."
I mean, Aragorn may get a lot of crap for killing the Mouth of Sauron, but what Guy does was far, far worse.
The Mouth of Sauron was a servant of evil. He was Sauron's servant. This messenger was just doing his job. He was just doing what he was told to do.
Exactly. But I will give Guy credit. The way he says, "Assemble the army," is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, Guy has all the power, yes. He's able to assemble the huge army, yes. But when it comes to war, he doesn't know what he's doing.
Pretty much.
And I'll tell you why in a minute.
But it does lead to something interesting about the way the Christian armies act. That is actually, it's correct for history, but to some people it comes off as something needlessly stupid, sending the armies into the desert to fight Saladin.
But no, that actually did happen.
It did happen, I know.
Guy really did march the entire army away from Jerusalem, away from safety, away from water, into the desert at the hottest time of the year.
Yeah,
it's pretty much the equivalent of medieval suicide.
Yeah, all because he had a massive ego.
Yeah, and I in cases like that, yeah, it's not something that they made up for the movie that, he does this. It is based on a real thing, and let's face it, if you're doing a movie that has a lot of elements of realism from history in it, you know, there's going to be things that people did that are stupid. You know, like some people seem to think that stupidity is just a 20th century invention.
No, it definitely isn't.
It's not.
It seems to be as old as humanity.
But yeah, you just have to face palm at that decision, though. It's still regarded to this day as one of the stupidest military tactical decisions ever.
It'd be like sending out all your soldiers without any weapons or any armor or anything.
Yeah, and especially in that, yeah, that's the thing. They did have weapons and armor, and they had to carry that into the desert.
And it was bloody suicide as well.
So yeah, whenever people say this film doesn't follow history, well, I point to that scene.
Fair enough. It's also, this scene in particular also does have a fairly nice send-off for the Hospitaller character as well. Some have interpreted the fact that he doesn't have a name and always appears to Balian in certain times of need.
I think,
and saying that he will see Balian's father in heaven. He does sort of give off that guardian angel quality to him, doesn't he?
I think he probably is an angel, but then again, you're not really told 100% either way.
Precisely.
But what were they though in history? Is it Hospitallers? Is that how you pronounce it? Or
they were
the Hospitallers.
They were an order of knights who were kind of warrior monks, but they were also an order who practiced medicine.
And overall, they were less militaristic than the Templars, weren't they?
Yeah, very, very less militaristic than the Templars.
Well, I guess then in one way you could say, well, maybe it's just a metaphor for how some of the soldiers must have seen those Hospitallers as angels, you know, coming to heal them or coming in great time of need to help.
Yeah.
Potentially, yes.
And now we're seeing the consequences of Guy's decision, which is the soldiers, they're exhausted, they've pretty much run out of water. They're just marching further and further into what Saladin wants them to do, which is to, you know, march under that blazing hot sun with all their armor and their weapons and their horses and whatever. And all Saladin has to do is just wait for them until they're at their weakest, and then he'll attack. Which was
there was also that.
Which was the.
I believe that there was also.
And that was the battle of the Horns of Hattin, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Well, it was more of a massacre than a battle, if we're being honest.
Pretty much. I don't know how many thousands of Christian soldiers went to their deaths here.
Let's just say that the Christian army was pretty much annihilated.
Indeed.
What do you guys think of the fact that we don't see the actual Battle of Hattin?
I'd say Ridley just when to hold back and when to save up for the actual siege of Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
too. Plus we know that, based on the visual build-up, that the battle, or the massacre of Hattin, was a completely one-sided victory.
This is probably something some would consider a plot hole. But we didn't see the fight. It's like, well...
How the hell would that even be a plot hole? I'm just scratching my head at that.
Everything's a plot hole now, according to the internet. So...
Exactly. Whenever you don't see something, that's a plot hole. Now, in terms of not seeing some things, yes, some things that you don't see can be considered plot holes if they contradict something that happened in the previous scene or previously in the movie. But yeah, so I don't know if there are people who think of that as a plot hole in this movie, but if they do, no. But yeah, I think it was wise not to show that battle because thematically it's not really necessary to show the actual battle, just to see the aftermath and also to savour the audience's palate for the battle that is to come later.
One of the great visual demonstrations of the advanced culture of the Muslim forces is the fact that Saladin carries a box of crushed ice with him.
Yeah.
I'm still perplexed just how they were able to procure that ice and keep it there.
Does make you wonder, yeah.
Do you think this could be another fanciful addition like the Roman cafe in Gladiator?
I don't know. And again, I don't really care. You know, I am a bit of an amateur historian, but I don't get hung up on details like that. To me, it doesn't matter.
But at least it does lead into a very satisfying death for Reynald at Saladin's own hands.
Who pretty much gets what he deserves. I mean, you do what he did to someone's sister, and that person isn't going to be... yeah, he's not going to be in a merciful mood, I don't think.
No, definitely not. Plus, I love the choral accompaniments. You definitely get the sense that what Saladin is doing is true righteousness, true justice.
What's interesting is, I've seen a painting of the surrender of the Christian leaders to Saladin, and this scene kind of recreates that painting quite well.
I wish I could see that painting someday.
It was in a history book I've got about the Crusades.
Sort of an example of a bit of the humane treatment that they were just given. You know, obviously it's hot. At least they were given something cold to drink, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be you're going to live after the event.
Scenes like vultures descending upon the fallen knights and soldiers really drives home the sense of desolation and hopelessness that Balian is now up against. And of course it's gotten to Tiberius especially. Once again, Jeremy Irons delivers on a great bit of acting.
Thank God Jeremy Irons was able to get roles like this.
The sad thing is, I actually think I did some research. I think Aragon came a year after Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh right, yeah, it did.
But he was still a respected actor regardless, and he had a movie like this to thank for it.
Yeah.
Well, he was also in that Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I haven't seen, by the way, but it's notorious for being a bad movie.
Oh, very much so.
Quite infamous.
Do you guys remember the first movie you saw Jeremy Irons in? Because for me, it was Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Well, it was definitely not Die Hard for me.
For me, I think it was Lion King, in which he voiced Scar.
I'd say yes, it was definitely Scar for me. But as usual, he is a man of incredible range. He can portray great villains or sympathetic counselors, like
sorry,
or batshit crazy mages.
Well,
also,
I just remember now that. Sorry, I just remember now that Brendan Gleeson is also in Assassin's Creed the movie, as well as Jeremy Irons.
Oh, interesting. Let's hope the movie can live up to such a high caliber cast.
That's one of its strengths, really. It's sort of like, in that regard, it could be the Batman Begins of the video game genre.
It could be. Let's hope so. It's also little historical anecdote. The man Irons is playing is called Raymond of Tiberias, but they omitted the Raymond part of his name in order to avoid confusion with Reynald de Chatillon. Do you think that was a good decision?
Wouldn't have worried me, I don't think. They don't look alike.
They don't, but at the same time, Tiberias is more memorable in its own right.
Well, isn't that the what the T stands for in James T. Kirk?
It is
Tiberius, yeah.
After the previous scenes in France and that show Balian having experience with siege engines, scenes like this in Jerusalem with him taking command of the garrison, they certainly make a lot more sense now, don't they?
And that was cut out.
Something
that was cut out of the theatrical version. Makes you wonder
I was
why.
about to actually say if that was or not. Yeah, it's good they put it back in.
How do you think Orlando Bloom fares giving this rousing speech here as Balian?
I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I don't see his performance as a bad performance by any stretch of the imagination.
There are those who I think just don't like Orlando Bloom for whatever reason, so they decide to pick on him.
I think some people try to look for the weakest link in a lot of things, and I suppose they were looking for an actor that they deemed was the weaker of all the others, and sometimes they just go by how many movies they've seen the person in and that. But I can't speak for everyone, so I'm not saying everyone out there who doesn't like his performance in this is thinking that, but there's probably some that might.
True. But at the same time, he still delivers on the key theme and motif of the speech, in that all have claim to the kingdom of heaven, and that they aren't fighting to protect any one particular creed or any one particular holy site, but for all of those within. I believe it's also here that another piece of reused music appears, doesn't it, Richard?
Yeah, they quote unquote borrowed Jerry Goldsmith's music from the 13th Warrior.
They did, and having recently seen the 13th Warrior and now seeing this movie again, I can't help but feel like a little slightly taken out in this scene. It's awesome and the music is magnificent, but all I can think of is, oh yeah, that's 13th Warrior.
It's funny
it's like
because
hearing...
that came...
Sorry, you first.
That's all right. It's funny because the 13th Warrior came out the same year as The Mummy remake in 1999, and Jerry Goldsmith did the score for The Mummy as well. Quite a couple of similarities between it.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely emblematic of Jerry's style of composing, and quite different from Harry Gregson Williams as well.
I love the fact that Balian creates an entire army of knights. It's like, yeah, we got knights now.
And of course, the bishop asks him, "Does making a man a knight make him a better fighter?" Yes. And honestly, with such a vote of confidence like that, I'd feel pretty confident as well. I feel pretty much inspired to fight even better than I normally would.
This was, I think, at the time, the biggest set in the world.
It certainly looks so. It could be. The degree of authenticity to Jerusalem hasn't been matched in a long.
You know, this kind of thing reminds me of conscription with the war, and how it wasn't really about getting people who were sort of wanting to fight, but getting people who may not have wanted to fight and putting them into the situation. Now, of course, in this scene, in this movie, that's not the case, but it is people that don't have that kind of experience as a knight being, put into that situation to fight.
This brief scene between Balin and Almaric reminds me of Pippin's line from Return of the King. I don't want to be in a battle. Sitting on the edge of what I can't escape is even worse. And you definitely feel that sense of being on the very brink of war and death.
Yeah, and I get chills every single time I see the catapults lighting up.
Indeed, it's all.
Sometimes it's better to be actually facing the challenge that you have instead of waiting for the challenge.
Just the fact that the Mozanoi was first completely shrouded in the darkness and finally coming alight as it did. That's one of those. It could be one of my favourite Ridley Scott film shots.
The man just knows how to do action.
And he knows how to do period piece action as well. We've had directors who've been pretty good, fantastic even at fantasy action, but this really does captures the hostility in trench warfare and high mortality rate of being a soldier or a knight under siege like this.
See, I think when you're doing films where there is a battle happening, it's great to have a great battle, but it's also good to have a nice lead-in and build up to it as well.
And of course, it helps to see both sides of the conflict. Whether it's Saladin patiently waiting out the siege, or it's Balin leading the resistance. And accompanied by such beautiful choir music as well.
This scene between Almaric and Balin was actually a reshoot, a scene that they added back in after the film wrapped production.
And honestly, I wouldn't even know that was part of reshoots. It feels perfectly organic to everything else we had seen.
Yeah, reshoots can be tricky, don't you think?
Oh yes, and there are movies in which I really feel that, like a scene was a reshoot. Civil War.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen that movie, but I know what you're driving at there, Oscar. And the thing is, yeah, I wouldn't have known myself, too, if you hadn't pointed that out, Richard, that was a reshoot. And yeah, sometimes reshoots in movies can be noticeable. There's a movie, I can't remember, it's not coming to my mind, but I think the hair length of an actor is noticeably different, or their hairstyling from one shot to another.
Bit of ironic twist on a tale of Jesus going somewhere on a donkey, where they basically mock Guy.
I didn't even know if it was satirizing any story from the Bible. I thought they were just humiliating Guy by putting him on a donkey with a silly hat. It looks like a duncer's hat that you see in some Victorian schools.
Pretty much, yeah. That's funny because I watched Return of the King a couple of days ago, and I'm getting flashbacks to Return of the King, the Battle of Minas Tirith with with the siege towers. And I'm thinking, where's the Nazgul?
Yeah, and given that it was only 2 years, or two or so years after Return of the King, it's almost understandable why some people thought of Lord of the Rings with the siege battles such as this. But at the same time, it's a different context, different movie, very, very different armies, and doesn't achieve the same cinematic purpose.
Oh, but this ripped off Lord of the Rings.
Purely because it's got Orlando Bloom in it.
And Martin Sokas.
But no, I see them as, different genres, different movies with different objectives.
I think
exactly. You can't just generalize and put them all under the same category.
Yeah, I think most people.
I mean, you can.
Who've seen as many films as we have, or just have a shred of common sense, can tell that they are fundamentally different.
Yeah. I mean, the only way you could generalise is to say that both have battles in them.
Yeah. And to think those siege towers are actually there as well. They actually built real siege towers.
And again, there are, in this case, when you have a blend of real sets, real functioning machines, and real actors, the blend between the real and the digital becomes very much blurred, and it all becomes one vision.
I wouldn't be surprised if Weta actually worked on this.
I think they did, didn't they, Richard?
Well, I know they did the armor, so yeah, I guess they probably did the battle scene as well. I mean the stuff that they used for the battle scene, I guess.
Now, what is the difference between a trebuchet and a catapult?
Basically, a trebuchet is bigger. A catapult's smaller. That's the main difference.
Oh, imagine being one of the Muslim warrior extras on that burning tower, and being a stuntman, specifically the one who catches on fire.
Very dangerous work, and I wish the Academy would actually have a category for best stunts, because even though I'm not a big follower of the Academy Awards, but I do think that they should be recognised for the death-defying stunts that they often do.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be that stuntman. Credit to him for doing that.
And I most certainly agree. It takes a great deal of gumption and resourcefulness to be able to pull off those kinds of stunts and still be authentic in them.
Now, what's kind of interesting is they weren't supposed to set that siege tower that you saw burning on fire. It caught on fire by accident, because those flaming clay pots that they throw?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are supposed to just burn for a bit and then stop burning. But when they threw them at the tower, and one of them burnt longer than it was supposed to, and the tower caught fire, and it burned, and they were like, "Oh, shit!" Everybody, it burned all night, and then the crew who went back to where they were staying that night, they came back the next morning and they saw that the tower was smouldering, and they were like, "Oh dear, what are we gonna do?" And then Ridley Scott came in and said, "No, that's fine, I can use that," and everybody went.
Well, it just demonstrates his resourcefulness as a director. He can make the best out of any unusual situation.
Yeah, like the crew, they were there, who stay there that night, you know, to look after the set and the props. Yeah, they tried to put the fire out, but they couldn't.
I'd say
Yeah, it is a true sign of a great director to be able to take something that wasn't planned to have happened and utilize it.
for me, the burning tower seems to be emblematic of the Muslim army's so far unsuccessful attempts to break Jerusalem.
What's the name of the actor who has the short hair and the black beard?
In this movie?
Yeah.
Could you be more specific?
He sort of looks like Oh, you guys haven't seen The Scorpion King, have you?
No. Well,
okay,
I have.
Yeah.
I have, but I don't remember it that well.
Okay, well, the guy kind of reminds me of him. Doesn't look like him, but reminds me of him.
Oh, I think are you?
But I'll see if I can point him out.
He's the gravedigger from the scenes in France, isn't he?
I don't think so. No, he was with Salahadin.
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about. He's the second of Saladin's counselors. The first is Rashid, who is a little more forgiving towards Balian, and then the counselor in black, who seems to be more fanatical and more determined to take the city.
Yeah, I think that was the person. Yeah.
I like that there's a contrast.
What do you guys think about that scene with the mirror?
I thought it was a nice touch, demonstrating the sense of guilt and perhaps self-disappointment Sibylla has towards herself, that she starts to see herself as deformed.
I like the sort of like the little smile that Saladin gives after his siege towers are destroyed. You know, as if he's saying to Balian, you know, well played, sir, well played.
It does seem to emit that feeling, doesn't he? Saladin was, of course, quite famous for being an honourable opponent and giving due respect to those who beat him. But at the same time, I think it does probably stick in his craw something fierce to see his army stymied once again.
Because I think even Saladin is starting to wonder. Part of him is probably thinking, you know, just what are we fighting for? You know, what is the point of this? Is this really worth it?
I'd say you're right.
But he's committed to his cause, you know, which is to get Jerusalem back from the Christians.
What do you think of the fact that Sibylla shaves her head to take part in the healing of the soldiers?
She in some way trying to be like a monk?
Or a nun? Perhaps this could be her way of doing penance for the things she allowed as queen. Or for killing her son. It's quite interesting how we have a scene that humanizes the Muslim army to a large extent by allowing their warriors to be buried, and Saladin appearing to be physically grieved by the loss of his men. And in contrast, you have the Christians in Jerusalem unable to bury their dead due to the desperation of the siege and being forced to burn them. just a very interesting way of contrasting the situations between the Christian army and the Muslim army.
Yeah, I agree. I agree entirely with that.
You definitely get the sense as one is more desperate than the other, and that the one at the city gates may in fact be just as human, if not more so, than the men behind the walls of Jerusalem.
Well, I think too, you know, different cultures have their own way of honouring their dead as well. And could be seen by some to be, you know, a wrong way of doing it, or you just to think back to the times where people would have first come across another culture's way of doing things and sort of might have thought, well, hang on, this is a bit stupid, or something else.
And I just love the fact that the Christian garrison won't surrender. You know, they're basically, you know, fuck it, let's go out on our own terms. Because even then, the Muslim army can't get into the city because of how brave the Christians are. And that's when Saladin realizes, if this carries on, his men's morale will go down, and then they'll probably start to wonder, we can't get in. Let's sod off back home.
It becomes a Pyrrhic victory for everyone.
Yeah. Do you guys think the Christians are basically choosing to go out on their own terms, or?
I would say that they are, yes.
Yeah, they sort of just, I guess in a way they're wanting their fate to be in their own hands instead of their fate being at the hands of someone else. So, why not go out and try and meet them and do that?
That definitely seems to be the feeling I get here. And it's also echoes Balian's own, how Balian takes his fate into his own hands. And in doing so, he leads his men into battle, not to die, but to ensure peace.
Yep. So many. I just feel chills and a bit choked in my throat whenever I see just how many men died, and it kind of makes a case for today, because this kind of thing is still going on, and it makes you think, why?
Of course.
just why? It's a city, like any other city in one way, and there aren't people killing each other over a city like London or Norwich or
New York City,
I guess, or New York City, or I guess for Rod, a city like Sydney. It makes you think, how did this all start? How this film really does hold a mirror to all of us and asks, and it basically says, we're still doing this, but why are we doing this?
And also,
well, I guess it's just human nature to want to control, and that includes other people, and it becomes a situation of you either do things our way or you're our enemy, and so you die.
I also think it shows how, and it also shows how far back these conflicts of faith and nations go, that they aren't new to the 20th and 21st century, that these conflicts have always been going back as far as history.
Yeah. I think this is in some ways less of a historical epic and more of a basically it's showing what's going on today in one way, but it shows it uses a historical setting to basically make its case of, this is what's still going on, and there's basically no need for it. If we just sat down and around a table and just met each other halfway a little bit.
That's the thing, because it held up a mirror to the Western world and how our strained relationship with the East still goes to this day. A lot of people felt incredibly uncomfortable with that fact and didn't really know how to respond.
Well, I like films that do that raises questions and they don't give you all the answers. But of course, as we know, in our current society, people for the most part want clear-cut answers and a happy ending to everything.
And of course, that should never be the only way forward.
No, it shouldn't be. Definitely not. Especially when you're dealing with this kind of subject matter.
Well, the thing is, the world back then wasn't as small in terms of everyone being able to know everyone's business in terms of country to country. And, the methods of getting from one place to another have changed greatly too. So, even though back then these things were sort of happening that are happening now, back then there was sort of like the distance between two countries that sort of held a lot of things at bay. And I just think too that it's another example of how it's more about one side wanting to control the other, and there'll be no peace until either one submits or the other stops.
I also think it's quite humorous in a dark sort of way how the bishop says to Balian, "Convert to Islam, repent later."
Yeah, that guy will do anything to get out of this.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder just how much faith he actually has, if you know what I mean.
Indeed.
Well, it brings up an interesting point, because it's like, how many people say that they're for something but their actions say otherwise?
Oh, that kind of is reflected in what Saladin says, Rod. Because when Balian asks him, "What is Jerusalem worth?" and Saladin walks away, says nothing. Then he turns around and says, "Everything."
Yeah.
It's also
And at this point, there could have been a peace between Christians and Muslims, because I know for a fact Saladin was merciful towards Christians, and he basically wanted Jerusalem on his own terms, and I think he would have come halfway and listened to what the Christians had to say if they met him halfway. But of course, as we know, a certain someone starts it all over again.
But of course, it is emblematic in this scene that of what could be accomplished if both sides, West and East, were able to compromise and make some sort of agreement. What do you think of the line, "What is Jerusalem worth? Nothing." Then he says, "Everything." What do you make of that, guys?
I think it's a great line, and I love how Ghassan Masood plays it as well. As if he's got what he wants now, and now maybe, he's thinking, hopefully, we can, maybe there will probably be peace now. But as I said, no, that instead a certain king starts the Crusades all over again.
But it's also...
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, there's always someone out there who'll want to continue on a certain way of things that was stopped if they believe it should be done that way still.
But at the same time, it is. Sorry, I can't remember.
What do you guys think of this final confrontation between Guy and Balian?
Hang on. I just remembered. At first, I didn't really understand the "what is Jerusalem worth" line because I didn't really know what Saladin meant by that. But I think I finally have the answer. Jerusalem can mean anything, anything you want it to be, whether it's the entire world or whether it's just another city on the map. There is no defined meaning.
It's what you take away from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the fight scene between Bailey and what's his name? Sorry, I keep forgetting.
Guy.
Guy. That's it. Yeah, between him and Guy, it's one of those things that you want. I think as an audience member, you want to see happen.
Considering just how rotten he has been for the entirety of the movie, it's very satisfying to have his comeuppance be given to him like this. It also shows just how, even after all his time, even though he's been humbled and brought to his lowest point, Guy is still so full of arrogance.
Yeah. He hasn't quite learned humility yet. But maybe he does. Who knows?
I think he only really starts to learn humility after Balian's kicks the piss out of him with a sword.
Yeah, sometimes you need external factors to help along in learning lessons like these. Not to let hubris take control of everything, and people put themselves on pedestals and put themselves above others and that kind of thing. And sometimes the only way for that person who does that to learn the errors of their ways is for someone to come along and kick their ass, so to speak.
Yeah. What do you guys think of that little moment when Saladin takes the golden cross and puts it back on the table?
Well, I thought it was a good way of demonstrating Saladin's respect towards the Christian faith, and that even though there may have been Muslims in his army who may not have shown as much respect, it was quite encouraging to see him demonstrate that sense of mutual tolerance on both sides that we even today still need to strive for.
Well, he's showing respect in a way.
I like how the ending it feels uplifting in one way. Well, this part of the ending, final 10 minutes of the film feels quite uplifting, because you get the feeling that it's over now, and that maybe there's going to be an understanding between the two different factions. But in about 5 minutes or so, we find out that is not what ends up happening at all.
Well, even then, King Richard the Lionheart was probably not the only lord or king of Europe who wanted to spearhead another invasion of Jerusalem and drive back the Saracens.
I know King Philip also took part in the Third Crusade.
But on the whole, yes, I agree. The ending, it's an interesting mix of bittersweet and uplifting, with a great send-off scene between Balian and Rashid, as well as concluding the enmity between Balian and Guy a few scenes earlier. It does wrap things up considerably well.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of sweetness to the ending.
Yeah, thanks guys, that's the word I was looking for.
And it's just, I don't know, I'm one of these people that if a movie has an ending that isn't 100% positive, I don't mind. You know, I mean, I like horror movies, and a lot of horror movies end with, you know, a bad ending, like The Mist and things like that. But, you know, it just depends on the film. It depends on how it's executed and what the story is and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, it goes to show that endings for films don't have to be all sunshine and rainbows. You can have both, even. You can have, you know, a mixture.
Exactly. And of course, with the subject matter as delicate as this, as the Middle Ages, you should not sugarcoat it under any circumstances.
Which I don't think they did with this.
No, of course they didn't.
Absolutely not. I mean, you even look at the violence in it, and that's another thing that I think, if you're going to stay true to a violent period of history, you know, and you know, every period of history is violent, I know that, but you know, you want to be true to it, and that's just another aspect that they get right in this film.
What do you think of the fact that they depicted Sibylla going to live with Balian for a little while?
I quite like that. It shows that she's accepted her new fate.
And she's also even accepted the decisions Balian made, even if it cost her a kingdom.
And here we have Ian Glenn as King Richard the Lionheart.
Now that was a very interesting casting. If only they had brought him into Ridley Scott's Robin Hood, this movie would have been connected.
It would have been, yeah. I wish they could have done that, but they were making Game of Thrones at the time, so
yeah. So yeah, that would have been the real thorn in the side. I'm sure they could have tried.
Ian Glenn's quite a good actor, actually.
He is, yes.
Yeah. And there he goes off to start it all again.
With Philippa and a ton of other people. But Ian Glenn, yeah,
he's actually
he's been in roles like Lara Croft, hasn't he?
Yes, he played the villain in Tomb Raider, the first one, and he also was in the Resident Evil movies as a villain too. He actually becomes a tyrant, and yeah, but his performance in Tomb Raider as a bad guy was quite good. You could tell he was enjoying the role.
I think he was in Resident Evil as well.
He was, yeah. He was in Apocalypse as well as Extinction.
Also, side note, I really loved the use of the French singer to over the scene of Balian and the growing bush. It ties into what we saw earlier of the theme of new life and the theme of starting again. And of course we see Sibylla in the place of his deceased wife. Overall, I thought it was a very nice cyclical way of wrapping the film up.
Absolutely.
I like the final text which says nearly 1,000 years, peace in the kingdom of heaven still elusive. And it makes you think, 1,000 years this war's been going off and on.
Indeed. And it still makes you wonder just when and how, if it can happen, peace can happen at this rate.
Well, I think it, one side wants the other side to convert completely. And until one side does that, or that person, or the side that wants everyone to convert ceases that desire, then, well, it's going to keep going, unfortunately.
But at least...
if people could just let each other be.
Indeed. But at the same time, for such a message, it doesn't really... It never really feels all that preachy about it.
No, it's interesting.
No, it doesn't really.
It's interesting you say that, because I thought on the Knight Templar was quite preachy with its message.
I wasn't really looking for the messages on the Knight Templar, but it might have been, and in fact it might be if I give it another look. But Kingdom of Heaven, for its subject material, I think it handled it surprisingly well, and surprisingly maturely. Considering how easy it can be to let the message overwhelm the story.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing in films, because I just don't like anything that's too preachy or too evangelical in thinking, and that extends beyond religion as well. It doesn't matter, fanaticism in an extremely negative way is just, or overbearing way. I just shut off.
But at least Balin and Sibella ride off west, away from the Lionheart and the Crusades. And that concludes Kingdom of Heaven. And
yes, well, it's an excellent movie. I love the tone, the music, the characters, the setting, just the whole design and look of everything.
For me, this might be either my second or my third favourite Ridley Scott film. It's epic, it's emotional, its themes are still resonant to this day. All of the actors commit 100% to the roles, and it's beautifully shot. And the music as well by Harry Gregson Williams is top notch. On the whole, it was unfairly maligned in its day due to a butchered theatrical release, but I do believe it has found its place in the world at last.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this film has aged like a fine wine, and it just took time to find the audience it needed for people to be appreciative of just how good it is.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of movies that have had to do that. It's about waiting for the right time for the movie to be sort of embraced in a better way. And I just think this movie is very entertaining, but it's also very, as you said, Oscar, it's emotional. And I just think it's an excellent movie.
Yeah, and it's funny you say how films take a while to get appreciated sometimes, and well, Blade Runner springs to mind.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah.
On the whole, I would say it's been one of those cases which it survived being butchered by such studio executives as Tom Rothman, and now I think Ridley Scott had the last laugh, because the director's cut is the version to go to.
It's the one that everybody watches, and the director's cut has got quite a bit more critical acclaim.
Yeah, I sort of I prefer if I'm going to see a movie for the first time, if it's got a director's cut that's considered better, I like to give that a chance first and see if I agree. And if I do, then yeah. And I'd say it's the same for this movie as it was for Aliens. The director's cut of Aliens, I think, is better than theatrical.
But more than that, I think it also shows that when it came to crafting a similar medieval or period piece war epic, Ridley Scott knew not to prove that he wasn't a one-trick pony. Kingdom of Heaven is ultimately a different movie than Gladiator.
Very much so.
Any closing thoughts, guys?
Best medieval historical epic ever. At least out of all the ones that I've seen.
And Braveheart
Excellent movie.
And Braveheart can go get lost in the Scottish Highlands.
Yes, because that film kind of gets worse. It's a film I used to actually really love, but yeah, the more I watch it, I kind of like it less and less, especially when I kind of find out what Mel Gibson's politics are, and and just how the film just fudges up history. I mean, I'm not really bothered too much if a film changes one or two details like Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven do. But if you do what Mel Gibson did on Braveheart, then yeah, we need to have words.
And it's a shame because I actually do genuinely love the score for Gladiator by James Horner. I think it's one of his best. I just wish it was in a different movie.
You mean the score for Braveheart, not Gladiator?
I said that. No, sorry, I did mean Braveheart, yes.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I just wish it was attached to a fantasy movie instead of a medieval war epic. At least it wouldn't have the stigma of, well, everything that Braveheart stands for. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. So yeah, I think historical movies are fine if they play around with details and they add stuff which to me feels kind of true to the time. But then, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fine. But doing stuff like showing kilts in a time period where there were no kilts or something like that, yeah, that's when you've messed up.
Pretty much.
Kinds of show a bit of ignorance.
Yeah, but I love Kingdom of Heaven. I think it's a fantastic film that just gets better the more I watch it. Actually, my favourite part of the film is the story and the quiet moments between the characters, and the fact that there is quite a bit of discussion to be made for religion either way. And I like how it doesn't really play down what the violence was like back then. And I like the fact that it shows there's good and bad on both sides, and that everything is not black and white. And the film is one big morally grey mirror. It shows you how it was, and it doesn't really make you root 100% for either one.
Exactly. And when you have such a morally grey time period as the Middle Ages, with such a ambiguous subject as matters of faith, portraying both sides as having their flaws and their virtues is the best way to go about it.
It is, yeah. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up.
Yep. But once again, it was a great time convening with you two to look over another Ridley Scott classic. As usual, it's always a great time watching.
Yep, same here.
Definitely.
So yeah, I'm Richard, and I'll see you next time.
And I'm Oscar, and I'll see you later.
And I've been Rod, and I still am Rod, and I'll see you next time.